So what is our aim? So our aim is simply to extract pure aluminium from aluminium ore, okay? So aluminium ore is usually, we call it bauxite, and it's mostly composed of aluminium oxide with some other impurities. But we want just pure aluminium. So that's stuff you get in cans and things like that. So we want just this, not this stuff. So what properties can we actually exploit? There are certain properties that of aluminium oxide and aluminium ores that we can actually exploit to help us remove the aluminium from the aluminium ore. Okay? So the first one is that aluminium oxide, which is Al2O3, is soluble in sodium hydroxide, which is this chemical, while impurities are not. Okay? So if I took like a chunk of bauxite and I put it in sodium hydroxide, I know that the aluminium oxide will dissolve, and then anything that's not dissolved will be impurities, which I can then filter away, right? So similar to the sand, salt, let's say a sand and pepper salt and pepper mixture, if I put it all in water, the salt will dissolve, and the pepper I can then filter away. So similarly here, I put the aluminium ore in the NaOH, and then all of a sudden, all of the aluminium oxide dissolves, and whatever's left over I know are impurities, so I can actually remove them. So this resulting mixture can then be filtered to remove these impurities, as I mentioned. And pure aluminium oxide can be recovered. So after we filter it, we can actually get back to pure aluminium oxide. So we're part of the way there already. Now, aluminium oxide has a high melting point, which is bad. So we dissolve the aluminium oxide in a molten solvent called cryolite, which is just another chemical. There's no need to worry about too much what that is, before we use electrolysis or electricity to decompose this aluminium oxide into pure aluminium. So what we do is we dissolve it in this cryolite, and then it becomes molten and liquid. And then we use electricity to separate the aluminium and oxygen, and then we get pure aluminium and some impurities as well, okay? So, maintaining the liquid cryolite aluminium mixture takes significant amounts of energy. Why does the aluminium need to be molten? Okay, so that's a legitimate question. We've already talked about how much electricity it takes to keep the aluminium to process the aluminium, and we know that keeping it molten will take a lot of energy as well. So why do we need to keep it molten in the first place? Well, in order to be electrolysed, the aluminium needs to be molten. Okay, so that's the first requirement. Now the reason why is that because aluminium ions need to be mobile in the cell. So for instance, the cell will look something like this. There'll be a box, and then inside will be the electrodes. Okay, so there'll be electrodes, and all of this section here will be molten aluminium. Okay. Now, in order to actually have the aluminium turn into pure aluminium, the aluminium ions, the little particles of aluminium in this liquid, have to be able to move towards these electrodes. Okay. And if they can't move to the electrodes, then they won't react with the electricity, and then they won't become aluminium metal. So that's why it has to be molten, so that the aluminium ions are actually mobile enough to get to the electrodes and become aluminium metal again. So in a solid state, of course, when they're solid, every particle is stuck in its place, so it can't move to the electrodes, so it won't be able to be turned into pure aluminium. So it needs to be molten for this to happen, okay?